I want to tell the story about when I was born. My parents were living in Las Vegas. My dad owned a really successful, well, I've heard it was a really successful advertising agency. Um, they had 3 beautiful daughters, a nanny that they adored. My mom liked her job. My mom loved her doctor. They were happy. They were successful. They were every 90s dream. And my dad, because he owned his business, was able to take lunches whenever and however long he wanted. And he would on Wednesdays take a long lunch and go to the temple because they just dedicated a temple down Las Vegas while my parents were living down there. And so he would go to the temple, and he one week came home from work and said to my mom, I was at the temple today and I got the impression that we need to move back to Salt Lake. And my mom was like, you're kidding, right? Because they'd both grown up here, and they wanted to, live their own life and not. They were happy and successful in Las Vegas, so why would they move? And my mom said, okay, well, I'll pray about it, because that was something my parents always taught me, is that when you receive revelation that affects your whole family, both partners need to pray about it and receive that confirmation. So my mom prayed about it, and she's like, she got her answer while she was giving their youngest daughter a bath. And it was, you need to move back to Salt Lake because you're pregnant. So my mom went and took a pregnancy test, and it came back negative. And she's like, okay, well, that's weird. She told my dad. He's like, well, are you pregnant? And she said, no. He said, well, you might need to take another test. So she did, and this one came back positive. So my parents have always been good at acting upon revelation quickly. So they started getting everything ready. And I mean, there were the doubts. My mom really loved her obstetrician in Las Vegas. And she's like, why can't I just stay? But we got the impression that we need to move because I'm pregnant. So we need to move while I'm pregnant. And so they sold their house and their business and said goodbye to their nanny that they loved, and moved with 3 daughters from a nice house with a big yard into my dad's parents' basement with 3 daughters. And then my mom found an obstetrician in Salt Lake and was going, and it turned out not only was she pregnant with twins. So it was considered a high-risk pregnancy because twins are high risk. She was going to the doctor every week towards the end of her pregnancy because it's high risk. Well, it was a stormy Monday in January, and my dad had to work because he'd gotten a job in Salt Lake. And so her dad was the one who took her to her weekly doctor's appointment. It was just a checkup. It wasn't anything special. And she was sitting there in the doctor's appointment, and the doctor looked at her and said, did you know you're in labor? And she said, I've been in so much pain lately, I couldn't even tell. So the doctor said, we're going to go ahead and deliver the babies today. And so my grandpa panicked and started trying to get a hold of my dad because he did not want to be the coach for his daughter. He was able to get a hold of my dad, and my dad was able to get there. They took my mom in, and she had a cesarean. And when they opened her up, they saw 2 babies, one really small one and one small one. And they took the really small one first. She was about 4 pounds. And when they took her, surprise, I'm the other baby. I was surprised. And so I gasped and swallowed some amniotic fluid and my lungs collapsed. And because we were early, my lungs weren't developed to the point where they have the juice in them that keep them from sticking together. So my lungs collapsed and stuck together. They had an artificial juice at the time that they would use, and it worked in about 85% of the cases. It did not work for me. They, at that hospital that month, had started a trial that was only at that hospital, that they took the juice from baby cow lungs and injected it into babies' lungs to save them. And that worked. And so I'm part cow. I don't consider myself a cannibal when I eat a cheeseburger, though. My mom didn't find out about this procedure until I was like 2. She read about it in a newspaper and put the dots together that was the timeline. But she figured out that had I been born at any other hospital, I wouldn't have made it. So she needed to be in Salt Lake so that I could be born at the hospital that was doing that trial. 25 years later, I guess it wasn't 25 years later, a little over 20 years later, my big sister had a little boy a month early, and he had the same problem. But she knew that the doctors could take care of it because she'd seen it work out for me. So while she had the stress of having a baby in the NICU, she had the faith that he would be okay, and he is. He's amazing. He's growing up way too fast, and I love him. I love all my nieces and nephews, and I'm so grateful that my parents listened to that prompting to give up everything and move into his mom and dad's basement. Oh, I can't imagine being in my mid-30s living in my parents' basement. But yeah, that's me.